Sometimes my husband and I go to a dinner party where we meet new people. And inevitably, once we're done talking about the weather, the conversation turns to what we do for a living. I am a professor of chemistry, my husband says. And he continues to say he develops methods to better measure the mass of atoms. Everyone is totally impressed, and full of expectation they turn to me. And I think, what am I going to say? Mother of two, social scientist. In the end, I just say it as it is. I'm a tourism researcher. Well, nobody's impressed anymore. In fact, there's an awkward silence, and people say things like, "Ooh, that's lovely, I like to travel too." So I thought, I'd take the opportunity today to ask you for a favor. If you ever meet a tourism researcher at a dinner party, please be nice to them. But I can't ask you for this favor without convincing you of two things. The first one is, tourism research is tricky. It's right up there with weighing the mass of atoms. And secondly, tourism research can change the world. Now, before I convince you of this, let me show you the size of the tourism industry internationally. What you see here is a bar chart showing you the number of international tourists traveling every single year. So at the very start, 1995 to 2015, the number doubled. In 2015, 1.2 billion international tourists traveled every single year. And it's not stopping there. The last bar you see is 2030, where we're predicting 1.8 billion international tourists. On top of that, we've got another 5 to 6 billion domestic tourists traveling. And every day, today, more than 8 million people are sitting in an airplane. This is a massive, massive industry. And that comes with social and economic benefits. The tourism industry contributes 10% to the global GDP and is responsible for 1 out of every 11 jobs on the planet. That's fantastic, but it comes at a price. Tourism also contributes up to 12.5% to global warming, generates 5% of CO2 emissions, 35 million tons of solid waste every year, and accommodation alone, that's hotels, motels, B&Bs, use 1.3 cubic kilometers of water every single year. So if we want to protect the 10% GDP, and if we want to secure 1 out of 11 jobs, we must make the tourism industry more environmentally friendly. Now, how can we do that? Governments could regulate tourism, but in so doing, they sacrifice tourism revenue, so most of them don't. Tourism industry could self-regulate, but in so doing, they reduce their profit. It affects their bottom line, so most of them don't. What does that leave us with? Well, it leaves us with you and me, with the tourists. And that sounds pretty desperate, doesn't it? Yeah? But remember, there's 1.2 billion international and there are 5 to 6 billion domestic tourists. So that's a lot of people. And if we could convince just a small fraction of these people to behave a little bit more environmentally friendly, it could have a big impact on the sustainability of the tourism industry. Now, that shouldn't be hard. After all, tourists like the environment, and tourists say they consider the environment when they make booking decisions. Well, we tested this with boats. We asked people who were just bought a ticket for one of two boats why they chose this particular boat tour, and we asked them whether they considered the environment when they chose the boat tour. And good news, 60% of our study participants said, yes, I considered the environment when I chose my boat tour. Well, after that, we hopped on the boat with them. And you should know that the two boats were identical, except for one thing. One boat was eco-certified, the other one was not. So we hopped on the boat with them and we asked one additional question. Is the boat on which you are right now eco-certified or is it not? And guess what? Only 23% of the people on the eco-certified boat gave us the correct answer. That means only 14% of our study participants were actually on the eco-certified boat and knew that they were on the eco-certified boat. So that's not very encouraging. It tells us that tourists love the environment. They tell us they consider the environment when they go on vacation, but really, they don't. All right? So we thought, all right, fair enough. There's got to be at least some dedicated environmentalists who are going to put their money where their mouth is. So we approached volunteering organizations, environmental volunteering organizations, and we asked, could we interview your volunteers? And we interviewed quite a few of them, but only one mentioned the environment at all when talking about the last vacation. We then reminded them that tourism is not particularly environmentally friendly, and they all knew it. Not only did they know it, They felt quite guilty about it. But the guilt did not translate into behavior. Instead, they came up with a very rich portfolio of explanations, excuses why they can't behave environmentally friendly. Yeah, sure, my holiday is not good for the environment, but look at these mass tourists, they're much worse than me. My grandmother is sick, she lives in Europe, I have to visit her, I have to travel for work. Yeah, sure, the tourism industry is bad, but look at the coal industry, at the mining industry, much worse, much worse. I cannot afford booking into an eco-lodge, it's too expensive. So a large number of excuses, but what we learned from this study is that even tree-hugging hippies like me do not behave environmentally friendly when they go on vacation. So we thought, what can we do? Maybe we need to remind people. We haven't given up hope in humanity. We think maybe we go in a hotel, we just forget our bad habits. And what we need to do is we need to remind people to do the right thing. So we went into a 4-star hotel and installed electrometers in almost 100 hotel rooms. And we then measured the baseline electricity use in all those hotel rooms. Then we used little stickers, 3 different kinds. One that was kind of a bit boring, reminding people to save electricity. One that was a little piggy bank, so it was meant to be more light-hearted. And a third one, which was deliberately designed to induce guilt in the tourists. These stickers were quite targeted because we had them at every single switch for an electrical appliance, right? Not just one little card somewhere hidden in the hotel. Every single switch had a sticker. But guess what? Absolutely nothing. Sticker, no sticker, piggy sticker, guilt sticker, no difference whatsoever. So at this point, we started getting seriously concerned. We said, well, clearly, talking to people, preaching to them, educating them, explaining, reminding doesn't work. Maybe what we need to do is we need to entice them. We need to nudge them to behave more environmentally friendly. Now, the most famous study in nudging is to put a fly on the inside of a urinal. And that does what? It improves the precision of the boys' targeting, right? Now, the aim of the fly is not to educate the boys, not to change their values, not to change their beliefs. The aim is not to change the precision of their targeting for the rest of their lives. It's just fun to target that particular fly in that particular urinal at that particular time. So maybe that's all we need in tourism, because after all, what we want to do is we want to change one tourist's behavior at one destination at one particular time. That's all. And good news, there's evidence that it works. Reducing the size of the plate at the breakfast buffet by 3 centimeters leads to 20% less food waste. Food waste is a big environmental issue. It takes electricity, water, energy to produce food, to store it, to refrigerate it, to transport it, to prepare it. And if then we end up not eating it, it goes into landfill. In landfill, it produces a gas called methane, which warms the globe between 28 and 86 times more than CO2 does. So that's a really big problem. But just changing the plate size by 3 centimeters drops food waste by 20%, and guess what? Our tourists are just as happy as they were with the big plate, because they can go and get more if they want, right? So a very simple solution how we can make our breakfast buffets more environmentally friendly. Another study asked the question, how much do we actually produce in food waste when we go to a breakfast buffet? And the answer is, every time, and that's for a 4-star hotel, people go, take food, they leave on average every day 15.2 grams. Now, 15.2 grams doesn't sound like particularly much, and in fact it isn't. It's about half a bowl of cornflakes. But remember, we have 1.2 billion international tourists, 5 to 6 billion domestic tourists. So if each one of them wastes four nights of average stay, half a bowl of cornflakes, we can line up those cornflakes 315 times around the globe. And that's every single year. The same study also found that tourists from different countries of origin have different food waste behavior. Some don't waste food at all, others waste a lot of food. We also learned that food abundance affects food waste. So the more food we see, the more we think it's probably nothing special, and we are more willing to waste it. And this will not surprise you, families are the worst culprits. I know that from my kids, we go to a hotel, they zoom around the breakfast buffet, they grab every cake that they can possibly grab. And of course, they find that half of them are not yummy, and those are then thrown away. Another way how we can entice tourists to behave more environmentally friendly is to give them a little reward for the desired behavior. Now, you're all used to the request to please reuse your towels. Well, we thought we'd take it a step further and we'd ask people to wave the entire room clean, because if you don't clean the room automatically, you don't replace the towels. But there's additional benefits. Overall, we save 1.5 kilowatt hours of electricity, 100 milliliters of chemicals, and 35 liters of water if we wave a room clean. Hotel guests are not very excited about being asked these kind of things. They're cynical. They don't see it as an environmental activity. They think, oh, well, sure, the hotel wants to save money at my expense. So what we did is we said, fair enough. We save a lot of money, actually, if we don't clean your room every day. But we will offer you an equitable solution. Half of the money you save, the hotel gets, and half of that money is returned to the tourists in the form of a drinks voucher. And they can use the drink voucher when they have dinner at the hotel. This little initiative meant that 42% of the routine cleans that would have usually happened did not happen. And guess what? The tourists were just as happy. In fact, if you trust hotel staff, there was a very lively black market for the little drinks vouchers we were handing out. So we could argue that their pleasure was increased, not decreased, by our little intervention. What's important theoretically, however, is that we had another experimental condition where on top of this, we also explained the environmental benefits of this particular intervention. And guess what? No difference. So the knowledge that it's environmentally good did not have the effect. It was actually this equitable sharing of the savings that drove all the behavioral change. We then debriefed with hotel staff of this particular hotel on this study and asked them, is there anything else we can do to make the operations of your hotel more environmentally friendly? And the head of food and beverage yelled, serviettes! And we thought, serviettes? What's the story with serviettes? We don't know that there's a problem with serviettes. Well, there is. If you go to a 4- or 5-star hotel, you sit down at the breakfast buffet table, you will find a very large and very thick cotton serviette, nicely folded on your plate. The moment you touch it, even if you just touch it to put it out of your way so you can eat, this serviette needs to be washed and it needs to be ironed. And we can't do that forever. We can do it about 70, maybe 100 times if we're lucky. Then it gets thrown away. So it turns out that using a recycled paper one-way serviette is a lot more environmentally friendly than using the thick cotton serviette. It produces 3 times less CO2 emissions and uses 10 times less water to use a recycled paper serviette. But hotels don't want to give their guests recycled paper serviettes. After all, it's a 4- or 5-star hotel. The guests have expectations. So what we set out to do is figure out whether the guests were actually upset if we changed the serviette at the breakfast buffet. So what we did is we changed the default. We gave people a recycled serviette instead of the cotton serviette, and we had a little sign on the table explaining why we did that and inviting them that if they felt strongly about a thick cotton serviette, they could go to the buffet and they could just grab one. Yeah? This little change in default reduced the cotton serviette use by 95%. And guess what? The tourists were just as happy. In fact, it's not that they didn't realize. We asked them, and they were quite aware which kind of serviette they had, but they just honestly couldn't care less. So what an easy way to reduce the impact of the tourism industry on the environment. So, you see, we are having a lot of fun doing our little environmental experiments. Now, what I didn't tell you today is all the failed ones, yeah, and we've had a few. But the ones that are successful are very rewarding and well worth all the effort we've put into it. So what have we learned in terms of knowledge development? Well, we've learned that current theories, which are quite good at explaining and predicting and changing pro-environmental behavior in the home context, fail catastrophically in the vacation context. Why is that? When we're at home and we save energy, we save money. When we're at home, we are very much who we are. And when we're at home, our neighbors are watching and judging us. So our behavior is very much in line with our beliefs and with our values. We go on vacation, we save energy, we don't save any money, right? We're still paying the same hotel rate. We don't want to be the same old boring self. We want to try something new. We want to be someone different just for a little while. and the neighbors aren't watching. So it's the perfect opportunity to be just a little bit naughty. As a consequence, our values and our beliefs do not align very well with our behaviors. And trying to convince us, preaching to us, educating us doesn't work. Tourists need to be enticed to behave more environmentally friendly. And there's 3 ways we can do that. We can change the infrastructure, like the example with the plates showed. We can change the default, like the example with our recycled serviette showed. Or we can give people a little reward for the desired behavior, like the drinks voucher example with the room cleans showed. But whatever we choose to do, the one thing we must not do is assume that tourists will sacrifice pleasure, enjoyment for the sake of their environment. They will not. We need to have them the same level of enjoyment, and the changes need to be painless for them. That's the only way we can convince them. What's the practical value of our research? Well, if I eat up my breakfast, and if I wave my room clean, and if I use a recycled serviette, it makes absolutely no difference. But if 1.2 billion tourists internationally and another 5 to 6 billion nationally do that, that actually can make a big difference. And I know it's hard to imagine these massive numbers, so I took just one example out for you to show you the scale of the benefits we can achieve. So if all of these tourists, of all these 1.2 plus 5 to 6 billion, if we could only get 1%, not 50, not 40, not 10, 1% of these people to not have the hotel room cleaned every single day, we could save enough water to provide for food, preparation, and drinking for 5 million humans every single year. So the scale at which we can make a difference is absolutely gigantic. So, I hope I have convinced you that tourism research can save the world, and I hope I've convinced you that tourism research is pretty tricky. It's hard enough to explain and change human behavior at the best of times, but trying to change it in times when people are seeking enjoyment is particularly difficult. So please, if you ever meet a tourism researcher at a dinner party, be nice to them. Say something like, wow, you are a tourism researcher? Tourism research is so important and it is so complicated. Good on you. Thank you.